Hey everybody, so this is something new I wanted to try out. So I've got a new feature on my phone that I can record myself in addition to what my phone is actually seeing out of the rear facing camera. So I thought I'd try to use that here to show a little bit about one of the things I need to work on. So this panel here sitting on my workbench for my piano is it's really the top panel that was on top of the I guess main body of the case. So this thing was glued on all the way across, and I'll show you over here. Done some work on the piano, but I've got it turned sideways right now. I've been working on taking the pins out and got the strings out, but you can see in this area here, this is where I've got that panel was glued on from. And when I removed it, it was challenging to get off, obviously being glued. I actually went through here and I had pretty good success for 3/4 of it. But then this last section here, you can probably see a little bit of what's going on. This thing actually split. So as I was removing it, it cracked and frayed and separated, and this whole piece now is completely removed, completely separate. So I'm going to need to work on getting that glued back together. That's my plan. I'm not going to try to completely replace this piece. I'm actually going to try to re-glue it and then get that back together. So I'm going to go through this. I never have done anything like this before, so it'll be interesting here, but I've got a pretty solid surface to work on with my workbench. I've got a good number of clamps, so I'm hoping that I can kind of put the layers back together, clean up any of the loose bits, and fill this thing up with enough glue that I'll be able to rebond it back together and still be able to use it. So yeah. One thing I found that was kind of interesting, I can see a little bit of how this was actually constructed to begin with. So if you look in here, you can see these routed edges. They've got, I don't know what you call those, mortise and tenon connections there, kind of the tongue and groove. So you get that tongue and groove connection, and it doesn't show up great in this video, but those end caps with the routed features are solid walnut, and then the rest of this wood is a different wood, you can tell because the color changes. I'm not exactly sure what it would be, but it's possible it's walnut also, but it might not be. I'm not a wood expert, but it's not quite as dark out there. So in general, this was a relatively clean break. It's just there's a lot of layers to the break. I think what I'm probably going to need to try to do is maybe separate the major loose bits and build this back up in stages. Because some of this, like this part that flips up right now, kind of bridges a gap right here. So these parts are loose, and they kind of went on either side of this, and that kind of made like a U shape, that goes in there like that. So I doubt I'll be able to do it in one glue up. I'll probably have to maybe intentionally separate some of these pieces to get them glued back together properly. And then if I need to do any follow-up work on it, I can. Luckily, this is a permanently glued on piece in the piano, so if I can get the top flat and the bottom flat, it's not like this is a structural element. This is just part of the cabinetry. So it should go back together okay still. And then, yeah, and go from there. So one thing I'm going to try to do here is go through and remove the veneer from this damaged section on both pieces. As I was trying to puzzle piece these back together, the frayed veneer, especially where it meets up, in here versus here, was getting kind of was interfering from it fitting back together well. So with this area being as water damaged as it is, what I went through here and did is I actually put a score mark with a straight edge and a razor blade all the way across, and I'm going to cut the veneer back up through here. I may later go further with this because there's additional water damage, you know, up through here, and then even, you know, through this section you can see some of that. And so I may end up re-veneering this whole top piece, but at least if I can get it off of this section where it's actually torn up and peeling, then that will allow me to have better luck re-gluing this together. Once I re-glue it, then I can work on re-veneering or repairing anything that's left. So what I'm doing is I have that score mark. You can kind of see it here, especially right in the center of the camera there. There's that score mark that goes all the way across. So I'm just going through with a chisel and I'm trying to get underneath the veneer and peel it up. And then I'm just going to go through it and work this up this way. So kind of need two hands to do that, but that's what I'm going to be doing here. And then hopefully I should be able to get this glued back together once I get this off of both pieces. So I got this first half cleaned off. So this now is all the underlayer veneer. So I'll be ready to start trying to glue into that. I'm going to go ahead and clamp up this piece too because I got a little bit of veneer here. This top part I need to remove. And then I'm going to make an attempt to glue these two pieces back together. There we go. So now that I've got both pieces cleaned off back to this veneer, I'm going to do some cleanup work and I'll get set up. Then I think I can start gluing. Traditional glue on these parts would have been most likely a hide glue, right, at 130 plus years ago. For this break though, I think I'm going to stick with a normal tight bond wood glue. Not reversible, but what I'm doing here is not really a reversible type of repair, right? The wood itself broke in half. So I'm going to go ahead and use some tight bond to glue this back together. I think when I put the new veneers on, I will use hide glue, but that's not what I'm going to use at this point. So let me get set up, get cleaned up here a bit, and then we'll get prepared to do some gluing. Okay, so I think I'm close to being set up for my glue up. I've got my clamps and stuff off camera for the most part, but I've got this mostly reassembled. So there's a little piece here that I've got taped up that can flip over. And then this is my main piece. You can see there's the break on the end. I'm trying to keep myself in this camera a little bit too. But this piece, I kind of went through a dry run. So I've got a piece here that comes off. And I've got the main piece that for the most part fits right back in where it's supposed to go. So that piece comes off. And then there's a little piece here. This one comes off. And then there's this section right here. This large piece comes off. So I'm going to put it right back together in that sequence. I'm going to put some wax paper down underneath my workbench. And then I've got a couple longer pieces here that I can use if I need to for clamping. And I've got this tall piece that I can put up here for clamping. What I plan on doing here is once I get all the pieces, I'll glue and I'll set them in place as I go. I'll try to work some glue underneath some of these loose bits. And then I'll put the piece in and I'll put that puzzle back together. And then from a clamping perspective, I plan on clamping from this top up here down to the edge, which will be next to the workbench, and I can clamp together in a couple spots that way. And then I'm also going to put a piece down on top so I can clamp straight down. So I can try to get that edge flat and glued back together. It'll be squeezed in between. I don't have anything long enough to give me a lot of clamp pressure this way, but I do have a couple long pipe clamps. I could even potentially put a piece like this too to give me some pressure in that direction. I don't think I'll need a lot though, based on the way it fits together. I think if I get downward pressure in a few places, and then horizontal pressure kind of going across this in a few places, that should keep everything relatively pulled together. I'm going to put a big flat piece on top as well, so I can clamp down on that to compress all of this together in the areas it's lifted up. And then I think that should be good. I still will have some small gaps and holes. Some of the pieces are actually still stuck to the top of the piano, so I could try to peel those off and glue those in a separate glue up. Or if I need to, I can chisel those off to get to a flat surface and just fill in the gaps and voids. But I'm kind of figuring this out as I go, but we'll make some progress here in getting this glued back together. Here we go. So I've got this all glued up now. I took a time lapse with my other camera, so hopefully you'll get a good view of that once I edit it all together. But now that this is all glued up and clamped up, I'm just going to let it sit overnight to see if see how well it did. In theory, it should be pretty good. I used wax paper on anything that would potentially touch the glue for my clamping, so I should be good to go. Not have glued my cauls to the board. But you can see there's some areas where I got a good amount of squeeze out, but I wasn't too concerned about that. I can clean that up. I wanted to make sure glue got in everywhere and filled all the gaps. So everything's lined back up again. If I come down here, you can see there's some cleanup there, squeeze out there where I had that crack. I've got that clamped. I might try to clean that up real quick, but that gap is nice and tight. So glue got in between there pretty well. And then I have a piece of board. I'm clamping in 3 directions, I guess. So you can see these red clamps. I've got a caul here that's clamping from the bottom edge of this board to the top edge on the other side. And then I got these clamps that are pulling down on that trim piece to get that flat again. And then I've got a double stack of 1/2-inch plywood. And then I've got some cauls there to help spread that pressure wider. And I've got that in 3 spots, here, here, and here. And that's to clamp the board flat again. So I'm about out of clamps, at least short ones or medium length ones. I've got some pretty long bar clamps, and I also, that clamp that is down against my 3/4 inch double stack plywood workbench here. So this thing should be hopefully nice and flat. As long as the glue comes out and it holds, it should be good to go. Okay, moment of truth time to see how this turned out. Take these clamps off. Oh wow, it's so wet. Definitely we'll have some cleanup work to do here. Don't know if I should re-clamp that or not.
Going quick.
You okay?
Yes. I'm perfectly fine.
There we go.
Aside from some of this wax paper and some of the glue that's still a little bit wet, this seam is like closed up perfectly on the side here. And I know you can't see it, but just looking at this face, this looks pretty darn good too. So I think in general, this appears to have been a successful glue up. We'll let this stuff dry the last little bit. And go from there.